square essentially, or a point with 4 vertices. These loop cuts will be very useful in dividing up geometry or in making sharper details when using something like a subsurface modifier. However, a loop cut will not work on a shape that has more than 4 vertices. So we're going to look at this object right here. So if we count the vertices, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we were to get our loop cut tool here, it does not cut through this n-gon shape that has more than 4 vertices. And that's because it can't accurately divide it up. It'll cause more geometry issues later on. Now, having n-gons is not a bad thing per se, but it just makes some things more difficult, especially when they're rendering. So that's why it is preferred in the industry to have something like a quad or a tri, which would be a triangle. So yeah, if we were to use the loop cut here, oh, I guess I actually did cut through. Normally it's not supposed to, there it goes. So when we use the loop cut, it cut it all around the shape except for here and on this face. Because these both have 5 vertices rather than 4 vertices. So using the extrude tool, I would like you guys to be able to try to make a table like this at least. Now, there are 2 ways to go about making this table. One would involve loop cuts, and one would involve separate pieces. So a good thing to remember when making models is if you will have separate pieces in real life, then you should probably make it as a separate part. So with a table, we have the top, the top table part, and then we have the legs. So these should be designed as 2 separate parts. And to make the table, well, the top of the table, all we will have to do is, I need that guy over here. We have to add mesh cube, go to edit mode, go to face select, and we want to click on the move key so that we can pull up the table, pull up the cube. Then we can flatten it out in the Z direction. And then we can click on one of the 2 side faces and we can pull it out. So now it's more like a rectangular or rectangular desk object. So now that we have the top of the desk, we can add another cube and go back to edit mode. Press S to scale it down. And then we want to click the bottom of the face and pull that down to make it longer. So now that we have a 1 long leg, we are going to press the A key, and now we'll select all the attached geometry and faces to the part. So now we can move the part along until a point that we find about right. Yeah, hopefully my computer doesn't die again as well. So we have this leg now attached to the computer, not attached to the desk, so that looks about right. So what we could do is the easiest way to add multiple legs without adding additional ones would be going to clicking on the gear or the sprocket wrench if you're British. So we're going to click on the wrench. That would say modifier properties. When you click add modifier, and when you click array. So once we have this set up, you see how it creates a duplicate leg right here, but we don't want it in that direction just yet. So we're gonna make the X direction 0. So now the duplicate leg is in the same space as our original leg. And we're gonna go into our Y direction, we're gonna put in 1. So it brings it in that direction because the positive Y axis is going to our left. So we want to make this a negative value of, let's say, about 2.5. So since that has not reached the full side of it, we can either click on this and input a new number, or if you hold down the left mouse button over this, you can slide them back and forth. So now that looks about right as well. So now we have 2 legs, or one side of the table done. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to add modifier again, click array, and now we have 2 sets of legs. So in our new array, our Y position is 0, our X position is 0, which is good. And we are gonna change in the X direction. So we wanna increase this to about distance. That seems right. So we just need to move it over a bit more, it looks like. And there, that looks about correct for the leg. All right, so now that we have the table done, we can go to a different object. I'm gonna close this one out. We can come back to that later. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me look at the chat. All right. So here, we have been going over the topic of subdivisions and something with loop cuts called supporting loops. So here we're going to insert a cube. We're going to want to move him. So I want to click on this tool to move. We're going to go back to the wrench for our modifier properties. We're going to add a modifier. We're going to add subdivision surface modifier. So there's two different types of subdivision surfaces: the Catmull clock and the simple. We're going to be mainly using the Catmull clock for this portion and later on. So we see how when we subdivided, it made it into this big object. So if we were to increase the levels of subdivision, it would become more sphere-like, but also requires a lot more resources for your computer, especially if you were to render it at above 2. So when we have the cube here with the subdivision, if we go to edit mode, it'll bring up the original cube that's unsubdivided. So whatever modifications we do to the cube here will be reflected in the subdivision, as the subdivision has not been applied yet. So it's not actually, it's like a projection of what the image would look like if it had all the effects done to it. So if we were to go to our loop cut here and click on this, you see how it changes how our guy would look. That's because we're adding an extra set of vertices in there that the subdivision also have to then take account for and divide out again. So if we were to subdivide, if we were to add the loop cut in, and when you add in a loop cut, if you hold down your left mouse button, you can drag it across So when we're dragging it across, it causes our model here to behave differently, as we're constraining we're constraining to what effect the subdivision essentially applies to it. Since we're working with a basic square, if we pull this over, we're preventing how it subdivides on this side. So if you were to do it on all 4 corners, we essentially are back with what we started as, with a very rounded cube, but it still essentially looks like a cube versus more of a spherical shape. So when you're doing modeling and you want to get a nice hard smooth edge, you would do something like add in a loop cut and drag it towards the edge. So now that instead of having a very curved edge, the edge becomes very flat and smoothed out. that's what this object looks a bit more like. It is just this object with two loop cuts applied to the ends, so that it becomes more like a barrel. So for this object here, we're gonna want to add in a UV sphere. I'm gonna move it over. And then you're gonna want to select around the full ring and extrude it along the normals, and then add in loop cuts to make it nice and smooth, so that it looks more like a thermal detonator in Star Wars, if you ever watch that, which I'm pretty sure all you guys have. So I would like you guys to try and make this object. So you will have to add in a UV sphere, add mesh UV sphere, select along the circle with either holding down Shift left click or Control left click to select multiple ones around the circle. And then you have to extrude along the normals. So we want face selection mode, Control left click. Extrude along normals, move that in. Yeah. So now that it is extruded along the normals, we're gonna want to go to Add Modifier, Subdivision Surface. So we're gonna bump it up to 2. If 2 is too much for your computer, you can just leave it at 1. So when we go out to object mode, we see how this is, it's very curved and sloped inwards. It's like someone smoothed out with like a clay brush. So in order to get a nice flat edge, we want to go to our loop cut and pull it up about as close as we want to that. So now, when you look at it, this edge is much more abrupt, much more sharp than the edge above it. So we're going to do the same thing with the top section. So now that also has a much more sharp and abrupt cut to it. Then we can also do with the middle section as well. Pull it down and makes a very sharp angle. So now that looks very similar to the previous design over there. You can do additional ones as well if you want on the inside ring to make it even more. But these inside rings are not necessary in our case. Our next object that we're going to make. Let's see, find which collection I have open. All right, So that's close. All right. Another thing we're gonna use later in our project is that when trying to make a nice curved surface, there are a few ways to go about it. One, you could make a geometry and then you could apply a subdivision onto it. So this plate here is just this plate with a subdivision applied to it. So it has more of a curved look and aesthetic to it. Another way would be to insert in a quad sphere from or add mesh quad sphere panel, and you could select faces on the sphere and then cut them out. Or the better way would be to go add mesh plane. So now we have a plane added in. So we're going to go to edit mode, and then we're going to right click on the plane and click subdivide here. Now this subdivide works differently than the subdivide and modifiers. This subdivide just divides up the faces into equal quads or equal four vertices corners. So that when we applied the subdivision to this plane, it broke up into 4 equal parts. So if we were to apply the subdivision again, it would break it up into 4 different quadrants. So I'm going to apply it about 4 times. Oh, sorry, no, I'm going to apply it 8 times. So now we have a bunch of smaller rectangles, smaller squares, not rectangles. It's like if we were to select one face, so tab, face, and pull that up, it just pulls up that one singular face. I mean, you can do that you could like select a row and then keep doing that to try and make it more of a curve. So that is very time consuming and very messy. So we're gonna go look up at the top bar. I want to go over to this one option right here called proportional editing. So when I click that on, and then when I click the proportional editing fall off, I want to open this up and click sphere and close out that menu. So what proportional editing does is when we have our face selected and we pull it, oh, sorry. I guess it's not working right now. Here we go. That's why, because my proportional is so small. So when we move a face with proportional editing on, it'll also move the faces nearby. So if we move this up to a higher value, it pulls everything nearby in a further range. And if we have it at a lower value, it only pulls things that are closer to us. So what we actually, let's see, is will smooth apply better in this. Oh, sphere is still turned on here. Oops. Not sharp. Smooth. Okay, yeah. So if you still have the proportional editing menu open, change the proportional fall off to smooth. And in case you don't have it open, you can press Control Z to go back a step or two. So when have the first face selected right in about the center, I'm gonna grab the yellow, grab the blue to pull up in the Z direction to make it have more of a domed or curved appearance to it. Now when we look at it, instead of being a perfectly flat plane, it has a nice even curve to it. So if, all right, so we're going to move on to the next section for this. And it's going to be combining the majority of the topics we have discussed through. So we're going to make a simple, or a more simple TV model. So we're going to move this guy over here. And then we're going to add in a new cube. Bring the cube over here. Go into edit mode. And we want to select this face here and just drag it. Oops. First off, very important that we need to remember to turn off proportional editing mode when we don't want to use it. Otherwise, it could make a mess of your entire model. So we're going to go back here, back to the top bar, turn off proportional editing. And now when the pull is out, we are going to add a loop cut down the center. So it's going to click it. And then we're going to select all the faces with tab here, here, back, and the bottom. So now when we have all these faces selected, we are going to right click it again, move down to delete faces. And then with the remaining faces here, we are going to press the A button, which will select all the remaining faces. We are then going to go back to our wrench tool here, click add modifier, and then we're going to go to find the mirror modifier. However, we see that nothing has appeared with the mirror. So we want to click Enable Axis Mirror along the y-axis instead of the x-axis. Now we notice that the two sections of the shapes have a gap in between and are not connected. So we want to go over here and clipping. So now when we click the green arrow and we pull it towards each other, they combine into one full shape. So we want about that's good. So now when we make an edit on one side of this rectangle, will be applied to the other side of the rectangle. So we go to edge, pull up. So anything done to one side here will be mirrored onto the other side. This works really well when you're trying to make something that's symmetric, so that you don't have to duplicate the side or make something slightly off and just get frustrated at yourself. So now we're gonna add in a loop cut. I want to pull it out towards the side about that much. And I want to add another loop cut in here and pull it up to about here. We are then gonna move over to the back of the shape. And we're gonna go to face selection mode with tab. I'm gonna click on this face. And we're gonna go over to our left-hand panel here. And we have this option, which is inset faces. All right, will do. Have a nice rest of the day, Diana. So we're gonna click on inset faces here. And with this face selected, we're gonna hold down left click. I want to drag. So I'll bring up a menu here that will have the thickness. So if we drag across the thickness with left click, we can increase how big or how small the inset the inset that is created. So we want about that much. So we also have these options up here: boundary, offset even, offset relative, and edge rail. So we want to unclick boundary. So since we're also creating a inset on this side from the mirror, it connects the two insets together into one big one. So now with boundary checked off, we have one big inset here. Now we want to go back to our loop cut and drag it down all the way to about here. So now we're gonna want to zoom in. We can zoom in with the scroll wheel, or I believe you can also control and then, no, not left click, control and then hold down the scroll wheel button to dolly in. So now with this loop cut in place, we want to go to vertex mode. We want to click this guy, and the rest of them that are in the line. So now that we have these vertices selected, we're going to press G once, and that allows us to move it about. So these vertice points are now going to be moved about anywhere we want. But we're going to press G a second time, and these were constrained only to the edge that the vertices are on. So you press G once, allow freedom of movement, and then G a second time. Well, I'll allow it only to slide along the edges that it is on. So we want to create about a straight line here. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're going to go back to edge selection mode. I'm going to click this edge here, and we're just going to pull it down a bit. So once we have pulled down that edge, we can now go to our face selection mode, click on this face, and click on this face. And zoom out, and we're just going to pull it all the way out along the x-axis. I'll pull it out a bit more. Then we're going to go back into edge selection mode. I'm going to choose this top edge here so that we can get a nice good slant to it. So I'm going to pull the edge down. It'll create a good slant. But however, also with this one, we want to add a little bit of a sloping inwards. So we can come over here, select this edge and this edge, and we can pull it in along the y-axis to make a bit of a angled sloping inwards appearance to here. So now that we have the main back parts of the shape completed, we can move over towards the screen. So we're going to go to face selection mode, and we're going to select this face. We're going to go over here or press I to inset the faces. So we just want a slight inset here. And then we can go over to here to extrude region or press E to extrude the faces inwards. So now that we have it extruded inwards, we can also inset the faces one more time. And then we're gonna extrude this new face outwards just a bit. So now this will have the main back plate of the TV screen finished. So in order to do a domed appearance like what we had with our, like what we've done over here with our proportional editing. Let me find which one it is. But with our proportional editing, we are going to want to go back into add selection mode, go into face selection mode, and we're going to want to have this guy right here. Let's see, is it in the menu here? No, it is not. Okay. So we're going to want to press Shift and then D on the computer, on our keyboard. So that will duplicate the object. Actually, let's save that step for a bit later when we have the mirror modifier turned off. It'll make things a lot simpler to do then. So first off, we are going to go to Add Modifier, Bevel. So now what this modifier does is it adds nice curves and rounds out edges. So we have a slant here, and when we turn on the bevel modifier, it makes a nice curve to it. You can increase or decrease the amount of curvature. We're going to go back to 1, and we can also increase the amount of segments. The amount of segments is how smooth the curve is going to be, but also generates a lot more geometry, so we have to be careful when doing so. In our case, we only need 1. We are then going to add a subdivision surface modifier. And as you can see, it looks kind of funky. So we're going to go to Simple, make this 2 levels. And then we're going to add another subdivision surface modifier. And we're going to add that up as well to 1 level. So now that we have something that looks pretty nice for a basic old school TV, we can now create the screen. So in order to create the screen, we want to go into object mode so that we can click this small arrow here and apply the modifier. We cannot apply modifiers while in edit mode. So that is why we have to go into object mode to apply it. So now when we applied the mirror modifier, if we go back into edit mode, we see that 2 shapes are different now. So if you add a modification to one side, it's not reflected on the other side anymore. So what we want to do is we want to select both of the faces of the back of the screen with Shift left click. And then we want to Shift D to duplicate. And we want to pull this out along the x-axis only. So that way it's still lined up with the model. We're going to right click and click separate selection. So when we click separate and selection, it creates an entirely new object. So now that instead of this duplication being a part of the main TV box, it is now its own separate object. So we're going to go into edit mode, and we're going to add a loop cut here, a loop cut here, and one here. And then we're going to add a proportional editing mode. I need to set all the faces first. Even though I don't have to do that with proportional editing. Oops, that's the single vertex in the center. There you go. So we're going to bump this curve down just a bit. So now when we look at it, we see that there is a curve to our plane that is now more uniform and flowing instead of something that's rigid and a bit of a mess. So you can see how that this thing where we use to move it is all the way away from the object. Now, in our case, this is fine. We don't really have to worry about it. But in the event that you want to fix it, you can go to select origin, set origin to geometry, or select geometry to origin. So now our geometry has been moved to our cursor. So we're going to pull in our screen. And as you can see, the screen is just a little small. So we're going to go to edit mode, select everything, and scale it up. If you have proportional editing on here, it looks like it will give you about the same results, but it's best to turn it off. So we're going to scale it, and then we're going to pull in the screen a bit. So now when we go back into object mode, we have our nice curved bubble screen. So as we can see over here, this one has two knobs attached to it as well. So we can go over, have our 3D cursor, move it to here, and we can add in an object, add in mesh cylinder. If we go to edit mode, we go into face selection mode, press S to shrink it down, to scale it down. And then we're going to press R, and we want it to go along the Y axis. So now that we have that there, we're going to punch in either -90 or 270. And that'll get the cylinder to face us correctly and be perpendicular with the dashboard of the TV. So we're going to line up the cylinder now. You can see it's still a bit big, so we're going to scale it down some more. And then we're going to also shrink the length of the knob a bit to about right there. But we want to add like a nice little effect and notch to this cylinder. So what we can do is press I or go over to Inset Faces, hold down left click. Sometimes it is finicky, and in the case that you can't see anything, you can just hold it down and then wait for the menu to pop up. Now we're going to go about to 0.02. And then we want to extrude this out just a little bit. So we're going to inset the face one more time. All right, there we go. So now this knob has more of a tactical texture and feel to it. So we're going to move the object in closer. Press A to select all of the geometry and slide it in. Oops. So now we can also do another thing with the knob to add a little bit of a groove to it. We can go loop cut and add in a loop cut here. So now if you want to add in a little cutout, we can select a face here and extrude it inwards. Now, when we extrude inwards, we see that we have this face here. And when we move our camera around, it creates a bit of a jumbled mess, and that's very awkward. So we're just going to delete that face and delete the other one as well. And now we are fine. We're good to go. So we can, with our knob here, we can press Shift D to duplicate it again. Press Z to move it only up in the Z direction, sorry. And now we have a second knob on the TV screen as well. So, oops, screen going crazy. So with this ring here, if you did not put in a loop cut here, when you would make that, when we were to make this sense, I want to go back a few steps to illustrate the issue there. All right. So with this here, if we were to just extrude this down and then delete these faces, it selects this entire face. because this is still connected to one big section. And we essentially just made a new face and pushed it into the old one, which the software doesn't know how to render it, so it thinks it's just two separate objects. So if we were to delete this face, we would have a big hole in here. And if we delete that, you know, we have to patch up this hole. But also, if we go to vertex mode, we now have 2 points here as well. And none of the other ones nearby have 2 points here. So that means we created 2 n-gons, and the rest are quads, which means it might make a mess if we're trying to render it or try and make it look even more polished, like add in a subdivision surface modifier. So that's why we had to add in the loop cut first, as this takes care of the issue and it makes 2 sets of quads. Now we have to go back faces. Now, in the event we still have a gap here, we can fix this by selecting, if I can get in close enough, and select this guy, this vertex here, and this vertex here, and go to mesh, clean up, merge by distance. I'm gonna increase that distance, and it snaps these 2 vertices together. Or you can go to, I forgot, this is not one vertex. Here it is. Maybe it's right here. Oh, well, I cannot currently find it. There's another one, but I forget what it's called. Well, I just normally use merge by distance. And you can also do that with edges, although not as good because, yeah, you have to be very careful with edges. But it can also still get it done, so it's best to do it with just vertices, even though you can also do it with edges. All right, so we're gonna go back, select the object, shift D, duplicate, move along the Z, and we have the second knob there as well. And then we're also gonna do our little antenna on top. So for this, we're gonna add in another cylinder. We're gonna go tab, edit mode, scale it down. Scale it down a bit more. And then we're gonna select the top face and pull that down. So now this much like a flattened coin again. So we can select, well, we're gonna pull it up, oops. I'm gonna go to object mode. I'm gonna pull it up a bit. This way you can easily look at the bottom of it. So we wanna pull this down, no. We don't want to extrude it down just a little bit. And then we're going to want to go back to face select mode. Select one face. And then press Control left click to select other faces along the circle. So once we have all the faces selected along this circle, we can go back to Extrude Region, left hold click, extrude along normals. So now when we extrude along normals, we're bringing it out more like a disc. So once we have that completed, we are going to go back to our top face, click on that. I'm going to inset it in, and then I'm going to extrude down the inside of the new circle that we created. So now we have more of a dish/tray that we can house the antennas in. We're going to tab, go back to edit mode, and then we are going to add in a cylinder. Add cylinder. I'm going to go back, tab, edit mode, scale it down really small, not really big. Make it very tiny. And then when I click the top face, I want to pull it up. So now we can press R and rotate the top face a bit. So now when we press extrude on this, or press E to extrude on this, it will extrude it along the direction of the rotated face. So when I press R on this new top face, and rotate this one as well. And then when I press E again, and extrude out as well. So now we have an antenna. This one might be a bit big. So I'm just going to shrink it down a bit more. So press A to select all. And we're going to situate about in the cup. So now we have our antenna here. We can go back into object mode, hold down Shift, and press D to duplicate it. And then we can press R and Z to rotate it about the Z axis. And then we can move it back into the cup. Now, there is another way to make curves like this, or make cylindrical paths like this, which are a bit easier, but also a bit more confusing. So first we're going to put our antenna hub on top of our TV box. So I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to click each object. And then I'm going to move them on top of the TV bots. So now they're there as well. So another way to make paths, which I'm not very proficient in myself, as I was spending a bit of time trying to figure out how to do them, would be to add curve, Bezier curve. So now we have this line here. And what we can do is, if we go into edit mode, we can change the angle of the curve. So if we click G, I believe, yeah, I'm not very good with handling Bezier curves. Haven't really worked with them that much. But if I'm able to get it to work, okay, there you go. So I got that. So now once you click on you have to click on the nodes. It's like the end and the starting point. So it brings up these two arms here. And these two arms will allow you to control the angle of it, or you can press R to control the rotation. So you can make this a full cylinder by, I believe, going to here, geometry, and extrude or offset. Oh, sorry, depth. That's what it is. So you go down to bevel. Yeah, so you will go down to bevel. If there you go. So geometry, bevel, and makes a cone for you. So we now have a pipe, and we can essentially modify this to do a similar thing to our antennas that we have already designed. But other than that, that should conclude the majority of the, well, I was gonna say demo, but this isn't really a demo. This will conclude the majority of the tutorial. Oh yeah, we can do Among Us. We can make an Among Us character in Blender.
Well, that's a good idea.
We can do that. It's pretty simple. Yeah. What's going on? Nothing. I was following you. Yeah. For the most part, Among Us character will probably be something like, we have a cube. Well, no, not a cube. We can do like a quad sphere. Oh God. I knew to my quad sphere. Oh no. Okay, well, we're not gonna use those. We're gonna use a UV sphere. Okay, subdivision 10 times. All right, guys. Oh, wrong one. Add modifier. Subdivision surface. Okay, that's about right. 4 times. Okay, so now we have our cube, our circle thingamabobber. And then we can just like pull that down. And then we can add a loop cut on the bottom. Get that nice, I don't know, shape that they have. Is that about the right, top portion? Tit Tats. Yeah. They do look like Tic Tacs. It's like that. Oh, we'll work with that. And then we'll add in, we'll add in a cylinder. I'm gonna pull this down. Make that tiny. This is like place selection, modifier, subdivide. Let me cut it. Go back into object mode. Okay, well, edit mode, I guess. Alt select. And then add modifier, array. I need to move that over. And then we have to make a mask. So we're gonna add a cube. Never mind. We're gonna make a new object. And then add in a cube. Instead of adding it on the same object. Like a silly person. All right. Flatten out this face. Add subdivide modifier. Put in a loop cut. Oops. There. And there. Still a little fat. Oops. A little long, but we can shrink that. That's close enough. There we go. There's the mask. I can make it on. I can make it curved, but I don't want to. And then new object. I can make a backpack. I'm just trying to figure out what's the nicest thing for one. Let's make another cube. Toss in another cube. And then we're gonna want to add a loop cut there. Cut edge mode. Oops, not two. It's one. Pull that edge up. Add a subdivision modifier. All right. So that's about five. Maybe a little too thick on the sides, but hey, we're not going for accuracy here. I'm going to pull this onto the back, and there you go. Close enough. Like I kind of forgot how to do rendering materials and all that stuff. All right, we can make him, or I think I have the wrong one. Oh, here, viewport display. There you go. And I have to apply the material to it. Yeah, I've got to do materials. Yeah, it's crazy what some people can do with shading. Material 1. Yep, don't have the material apply. It's one of these colors eventually. I'll find it. Oh, remove the top material. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, that made sense. See, I've forgotten how to do this. It's been a while since I messed with materials. Although you can get some nice like glass effects done with them. So we can make a new material here. Get blue. Nope, stop. Then we have to add specular subsurface stuff. Yeah. Anyways, we're kind of done now. Glass. They're among us. They're coming to kill us all. Yeah. That concludes our TED Talk today. And the imposter is Daniel, so we need to eject him.
Wait, I'm the one recording the video.
Bryce sauce.
That's why you gotta go down, man.
But no.
How do you plead?
Oh no.